Let us travel back in time together. Long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before the empires of Rome and Greece, there was Africa, the cradle of humanity. It is on this continent that the first humans were born, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Africa saw the flourishing of brilliant civilizations, such as ancient Egypt, with its pharaohs, hieroglyphs, and gigantic monuments. Later, great empires emerged: the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Zimbabwe Empire, and many others. These kingdoms were rich in gold, salt, and ivory, and traded with the entire world. But this glorious history was brutally interrupted by the slave trade and colonization. Millions of Africans were torn from their land and forcibly taken to the Americas, Europe, and elsewhere. This trauma deeply marked minds. It is in this context of suffering and oppression that Pan-Africanism was born. Pan-Africanism is the idea that all peoples of African descent, wherever they are in the world, share a common history, culture, and struggles. It is a movement that calls for unity, solidarity, and liberation. In this course, we will explore the origins of this powerful idea, following the thread of time. We will begin with the first African empires, then see how the slave trade and colonization created a need for unity. Next, we will study the early Pan-Africanist thinkers and movements, such as those of W.E.B. Du Bois or Marcus Garvey. Finally, we will see how Pan-Africanism contributed to African independences and the creation of the African Union. This historical journey will show us how Africa, from the cradle of humanity, became a continent in search of unity and rebirth. SCP Part 1: Ancient Origins and the Slave Trade. To understand Pan-Africanism, one must first understand what united and divided African peoples. The history of ancient Africa is a history of great achievements. Ancient Egypt, with its civilization spanning over 3,000 years, developed writing, mathematics, astronomy, and monumental architecture. Further west, the Ghana Empire, c. 300–1200, was famous for its gold and trans-Saharan trade. The Mali Empire, circa 1230 to 1600 under the reign of Mansa Musa, was one of the richest in the world. The Songhai Empire, circa 1460 to 1591, dominated much of West Africa. These empires had universities, libraries, and advanced legal systems. However, from the 15th century onwards, Europeans began exploring the African coasts. The slave trade quickly took on a tragic scale. Millions of Africans were captured, sold, and forcibly transported to the Americas. This system, called the Atlantic slave trade, lasted over 400 years. It devastated entire communities, tore apart families, and weakened African societies. H.
Spora, a dispersion of African peoples across the world. This diaspora preserved cultural ties and a memory of Africa. It was within this diaspora that the first Pan-Africanist ideas germinated, as a response to oppression and dehumanization. SCP Part 2: The Birth of the Pan-Africanist Movement, 19th and 20th centuries. In the 19th century, African and Afro-descendant intellectuals began to reflect on African unity. One of the first great thinkers was Edward Wilmot Blyden, 1832–1912, an educator and writer from the West Indies. He championed the idea of an African personality and a return to Africa. Another key moment was the Berlin Conference, 1884–1885, where European powers partitioned Africa without consulting Africans. This triggered the scramble for Africa and the colonization of the continent. In reaction, voices rose to demand freedom and unity. In 1900, the first Pan-African Conference was held in London, organized by Henry Sylvester Williams, a lawyer from Trinidad. It was there that the term Pan-Africanism was first used. The man who would give global scope to this movement was William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, 1868–1963. Du Bois was an African-American sociologist, historian, and activist. He organized several Pan-African congresses between 1919 and 1945, demanding the independence of African colonies. He wrote that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Meanwhile, Marcus Garvey, 1887–1940, a Jamaican, founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. He advocated for a return to Africa and the creation of a powerful African state. His slogan "Africa for Africans" inspired millions. These movements laid the foundations for the struggles for independence, SIP Part 3, African Independences and the Organization of African Unity, OAU. After World War II, 1939 to 1945, the Pan-Africanist movement took on a new dimension. The colonial powers were weakened, and colonized peoples demanded their freedom. The Fifth Pan-African Congress, held in Manchester in 1945, was a turning point. It brought together leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta, Kenya, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria. They demanded the immediate end of colonialism. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence, under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah was a fervent Pan-Africanist. He declared, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of the African continent." He worked for the political and economic unity of Africa. In 1963, the leaders of 32 African states met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to found the Organization of African Unity, OAU.
Inability to resolve internal conflicts. Despite this, it played an important role in decolonization and the fight against apartheid in South Africa. SEP Part 4, The African Union and Pan-Africanism in the 21st Century. In 2002, the OAU was replaced by the African Union, AU. The AU is a more ambitious organization, aiming to create deeper economic and political integration, modeled on the European Union. Its objectives include the creation of a continental free trade area, the AfCFTA, which entered into force in 2021, the promotion of peace and security, and sustainable development. The AU also launched Agenda 2063, a vision for an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. Today's Pan-Africanism is not limited to politics. It is also expressed in culture, music, literature, and the arts. Artists like Fela Kuti, Nigeria, Miriam Makeba, South Africa, and Youssou N'Dour, Senegal have used their art to promote African unity and denounce injustices. The Black Lives Matter movement and calls for the restitution of African cultural property looted by colonizers are also manifestations of contemporary Pan-Africanism. However, challenges remain: armed conflicts, poverty, inequalities, and ethnic or national divisions. Pan-Africanism remains an ideal to be achieved, a project under construction. Young generations are called upon to continue this dream of African unity and rebirth. SEP Index section, Major Debates of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is not a monolithic movement. It has experienced debates and divergences. One of the main debates concerns the approach to adopt. Should immediate political unity be prioritized, as Kwame Nkrumah wanted, or gradual integration through economic steps? Another debate concerns the role of the African diaspora. Some thinkers, like Marcus Garvey, insisted on a physical return to Africa. Others, like W.E.B. Du Bois, believed that Afro-descendants should fight for their rights in their respective countries while supporting Africa. Today, the question of the restitution of artworks and reparations for slavery and colonization is at the heart of discussions. Countries like Benin or Nigeria demand the return of their cultural heritage. The language debate is also important. Should a common African language, like Swahili, be adopted, or should colonial languages, English, French, Portuguese, be used as working languages? The African Union uses several languages, but English and French dominate. Finally, Pan-Africanism must contend with 21st century realities: globalization, climate change, new technologies, and global inequalities. Documents from the Alkebulan Academy Library, such as poems from the African American Poetry section, show that the quest for identity and justice is still alive.
E.g., 1900 First Pan-African Conference, 1957 Ghana's independence, 1963 creation of the OAU, 2002 creation of the AU. Make flashcards on important figures: Du Bois, Garvey, Nkrumah, Blyden. For each, note their nationality, main ideas, and actions. Use mind maps, connect concepts: slave trade, colonization, Pan-Africanism, independences, African Union. Watch documentary videos on African empires or independences. Discuss with classmates or family, explain what you have learned. Reread key quotes from Pan-Africanist thinkers. Finally, remember that Pan-Africanism is a living history. Follow the news of the African Union and contemporary African movements. SEP to go further, readings, references, open questions. If this topic interests you, here are some leads. You can read biographies of Kwame Nkrumah, Africa Must Unite, or W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk. The novel 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup is a powerful testimony about slavery. The poetry collection African American Poetry brings together texts that express the quest for freedom and identity. To understand the slave trade, the book Africa Slave Trade is a valuable resource. Finally, you can take an interest in films like Amistad or Black Panther, which explore Pan-Africanist themes. Open questions for reflection. What does African unity mean to you? How can Pan-Africanism help solve Africa's current problems? What is the role of youth in this movement? Why is it important to know African history before colonization?